Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. What on earth was that yesterday? Purdue's offense shows some real signs of life. The Boilermakers put up 49 points in a win over Minnesota. Going to break down Purdue's win here on the show today. Plus, Ryan Walters made some really interesting comments this week as it pertains to NIL as Purdue begins to turn focus towards what's next for the football program. I'm going to dive into those today, and Purdue basketball gets started with some real competition tomorrow when it hosts Xavier in the Gavitt games. Purdue took down Morehead State 87-57 the other night, so talk a little bit about where Purdue is after two games, and going to talk about what I'm going to be looking for from Purdue as it gets into some higher level of competition. But real quick, if you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. There is a lot to talk about here as we are in those few weeks of crossover between football and basketball. So you'll want to follow there, and be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss anything. Lots to talk about. I'll be here twice a week through the end of football season, and we'll see where basketball takes us, but no less than weekly for sure. But let's get into football here. Purdue 49, Minnesota 30, a game that really came out of nowhere. You know, the total for this thing was down below 50. I think it was like 45 or so. This was an offensive explosion that really came out of nowhere. Purdue's offense scored more against Minnesota than it did in the entire month of October. Purdue scored 35 points in the month of October. I think that sounds right. Nonetheless, Purdue did not score much in October. Purdue scores a ton here. 4-game losing streak for Purdue goes away. Boilermakers now 3-7 on the season. The offense is the story from this one. It's been much maligned all season. The criticisms have been, very justified, but very widespread. There's been criticism on Graham Harrell for the play calling. There's been criticism on Hudson Card for not being, the transcendent quarterback that Purdue fans hoped he'd be. The wide receivers haven't done much. The offensive line has really struggled. There's been plenty of blame to go around, but Purdue really puts all of that behind it in this one, puts up 604 yards of offense. Purdue's first 600-yard game since last year against Nebraska. 8 yards per carry for 353 yards rushing. Unbelievable. That's something we really haven't seen from Purdue in forever. Unbelievable that Purdue did that. Hudson Card was terrific. 17 for 25, 251 yards, 3 touchdowns for him. There were times in this game where it looked like Hudson Card could do no wrong. There were a few plays. The one that really sticks with me is when Purdue's going to the north end zone and he dodges some pressure up the middle. Great footwork to keep the play alive. Finds Deion Burks wide open for a touchdown. It was just one of those days for him. It was Card's best day as a Boilermaker. It was by far the offense's best day of the season. I know that's not really saying a lot because the offense has not been great for most of this year, but really, really good stuff. The run game was dominant. Both Tyrone Tracy and Devin Mockabee had great days, over 100 yards for each of those guys. Hudson Card, too. We saw Hudson Card use his legs. And this is something that I think Purdue wants to use more than it's able to because you can't get him hurt. We don't know the extent to how banged up he was from that Illinois game to now. I don't know if he's 100% now. It seems like it, but I don't truly know. But we know how critical it is to keep him healthy. So Purdue doesn't want him running a ton, but he ran a fair amount, 8 carries for 44 yards. That really kept the defense honest, and that helped spark Purdue's offense because once Minnesota had to account for that, that's when Purdue's traditional running game with Maccabee and Tracy really took off. 44 carries for Purdue in this game. I don't have stats in front of me, but that's got to be the most Purdue has had in a while. Purdue just doesn't run the ball like that. So a fantastic day. 8 yards per carry is unreal. Purdue did this too in the passing game without a receiver really having some standout game. Garrett Miller was solid, leading receiver for Purdue, but none of the wideouts really had a huge day. Tyrone Tracy has the deep catch, same with Burks, but it was just a really spread out day for Purdue's offense. And on the defensive side of the ball, it wasn't like the defense was out of this world. Minnesota still put up 400 yards of offense in this game. But what tells you everything you need to know is that Purdue went 5 for 5 in the red zone, scoring touchdowns on all 5 of those red zone trips, whereas Minnesota kicked 4 field goals in this game, made 3 of them. It was a bit of a bend, don't break defense for Purdue. That's not the style that Ryan Walters wants to play, but it worked for Purdue in this one. I mean, it wasn't intentional, but Purdue came out with the approach that Ethan Kaliakmanis was going to have to beat it. That Minnesota could get yards on the ground, but when that field condensed, it was going to have to be Ethan Kaliakmanis who took over and got Minnesota into the end zone, and that was a wise bet. Ethan Kaliakmanis isn't that good. None of the quarterbacks in the Big Ten West are that good. But Kaliakmanis goes 18 for 42, 43% completion there. Sure, he had 292 yards, 3 touchdowns, but betting on that completion percentage was the wise bet for Purdue. Daniel Jackson, good receiver. Brevin Spanford, good tight end. Didn't realize till yesterday that Chris Ottman-Bell is somehow still playing college football, but you live with it. That's what you got to do. Minnesota wanted to run the ball a lot, but Purdue got to a point in this game where Minnesota needed to pass. And if you told me before the game that Minnesota would throw the ball 42 times to just 27 rush attempts, I would feel very good about Purdue's outcome there. And that's how it played out. A really strong performance. I can only mention Nick Scorton, Kadron Jenkins, and Dylan Thieneman so much, but those guys were great again for Purdue. Just an all-around good performance. And I should have mentioned, too, the offensive line. I mean, this thing's in shambles, and it came together really well yesterday. You have Josh Kaltenberger starting at tackle, at right tackle for you. You have Ben Farrell, an NAIA transfer, starting at left tackle because Daniel Johnson was out. I mean, this thing was as makeshift as you could possibly think of, and Purdue makes it work. Credit to the offensive line coach Marcus Johnson. Credit to Ryan Walters. Credit to everyone here, because when Purdue's 2-7, I've talked about this a bit in recent weeks. You worry about the team quitting. Now, I'd also argue in year 1 of a new coaching staff, quitting would be a little bit concerning, but it's a bit natural, especially in the world we live in now of college football, where guys are very focused on what's next for them with the transfer portal. This group didn't quit. Purdue came out very focused. Purdue went down 7-0 right away. Minnesota goes down in 4 plays, and this thing's 7-0. But Purdue didn't flinch. Purdue fought back. Purdue forced Minnesota to kick a few field goals, and Purdue just kept scoring touchdowns. Crazy how effective Purdue was on offense. Credit to Graham Harrell. He really schemed up a good game here. Purdue had 12 drives, and one of those was just a one player before half. So of Purdue's 11 real drives, it scores a touchdown on 7 of them. That's incredible. 58% touchdown rate. Not bad. Really good stuff from Purdue. A really encouraging performance. Yes, Purdue is just 3-7 now. and the season still has not gone how anyone wanted. It could spark a nice finish, though, and that's what you've got to hope for. Purdue has Northwestern next. Northwestern's hot. Northwestern just beat Wisconsin up in Madison. Purdue looks at that and says, no way. How do you do that? But Northwestern's playing well. Against all odds, Northwestern is playing well. And then you host Indiana at the end of the season, who, at bare minimum, is having some success on offense right now. Yes, Illinois hung 48 on them, but Indiana took that thing to overtime and scored a bunch of points in the process. So, these aren't pushover games. These are games Purdue will have to play well to win, but they're games Purdue can win. And to close that out, to close the season strong, I think would be a real positive for this team. But, I got a question from a listener about, how good this win felt and how it feels like some real progress for Purdue as it comes to proof of concept for doing something different and moving into the expanded Big Ten. And I agree. I've said from the start that I think proof of concept is the number one thing that's important for this season for Purdue. And on the offensive side of the ball, tonight was a little bit of that it hasn't really had all year. But as Purdue goes into the expanded Big Ten, and Purdue goes into this offseason, really, the one big question is one that Ryan Walters raised this week. I don't know how many of you listen to coaches' radio shows. I do. Second straight week that Ryan Walters has created some buzz with his comments on the radio show, because this week he was asked about recruiting at this time of year and kind of what's going on. Signing day is a little over a month away. The transfer portal opens on December 4th. Purdue has been very well publicized, connected to some junior college recruits. Ryan Walters got asked about that, and he took this into an NIL conversation. He said they're focusing on JUCO, they're focusing on getting ready for the transfer portal, and he got right into fundraising, talking about NIL. And he said that, when there are different tiers of the conference as it comes to NIL, that Purdue's in the bottom tier. And he said Purdue may even be last in the conference when it comes to NIL. Pushing people to donate. Kind of said, the people who like to play Monday morning quarterback, well, they can come donate and help us get some more talent on the field. This was really interesting to me. I tweeted about it at the time. It got a lot of interaction. A lot of folks talking about it on Twitter, on message boards. So figured let's talk about it here. This was clearly something that Ryan Walters had planned in advance. This didn't just come off the cuff. This was something that he had probably planned to talk about on the show. And that's great. I mean, why not? It's his show. It's very relevant. But Purdue's preparing for transfer portal season. It's a month away, less than a month away. December 4th it opens. And Ryan Walters knows how important NIL is when it comes to recruiting transfers. I think you can recruit pretty well in high school without a huge NIL effort. I don't know if you're going to get top 100, the top 247 on 300 guys, but you can recruit pretty well without a bunch of NIL promises. With transfers, that's the number one thing. It's critically important. And I think this was his way of coming out and starting a fundraising push for the Boilermaker Alliance. Is Purdue actually dead last in the Big Ten when it comes to NIL? I have no idea. I took this to mean football specifically. If you're counting basketball, I cannot imagine that Purdue is dead last when it comes to NIL. But I've always said, Purdue in the NIL world got the push when Zach Edey came back, and the publicized figures, estimates that he may be making. Obviously, it's a lot. He came back for a lot of money, and I think Purdue basketball as a whole does pretty well from an NIL front. But I don't think the Zach Edey situation was a good indicator of what Purdue's NIL infrastructure really looks like. I think basketball certainly takes the priority. It's Indiana, after all. I mean, Purdue fans are are basketball inclined. It's a basketball school. 2 weeks ago, Purdue played a regular season football game and a basketball scrimmage on the same day, and we all saw which got more attention from the fans. It wasn't close. But, Purdue has to bridge this gap a little bit. Basketball is probably solid. Football probably needs a way to go. Whether dead last is an exaggeration or not, I don't know. It certainly could be. It certainly could be a fundraising effort, Hey, we're dead last. We need you. We need you to step up. That'd be smart. That's just sales 101. But I thought it was really interesting that he took this approach because the importance here is twofold. Number one, Purdue needs some NIL strength to upgrade the roster via the transfer portal. Purdue wins yesterday 49-30, but your eyes haven't fooled you for the majority of this season. Purdue's roster is not ultra competitive when it comes to high-end, all Big Ten caliber talent. Purdue has to get more of that in there for it to bridge the gap between where Purdue is now and, the lower level of the upper half of the Big Ten. I know that's a mouthful, but, the 5 through 9 range of the new Big Ten, Purdue has a ways to go to get there roster-wise. Purdue has to be able to go get solid pieces out of the portal. And I'm not saying Purdue's got to go get, the Caleb Williams, the Keon Coleman, the Bear Alexanders, the really high-end guys who hit the portal, Jordan Addison a couple years ago. That's not what Purdue's going to be doing. But can Purdue consistently go out and recruit guys who are starting level players for a good Big Ten team? That's what Purdue has to do via the portal, and it's going to take NIL strength to get there. But also, on the flip side, the portal's a two-way street, and the NIL navigation of the portal is a two-way street. Purdue has to have strength in NIL to retain some of its top players. This season hasn't been great. This roster isn't loaded with talent, but there are some guys who absolutely will be in demand by other schools. I'm not here to throw out names and start doing that, but you guys are a pretty shrewd audience. You guys know ball. You know who I'm talking about here. There are good players on this roster who have eligibility left who could absolutely play for a college football playoff contender. And those schools have money. It's no secret here. That's where this comes into play because, yes, you need to go get guys, but you also need to retain what you have in terms of your top talent because that's a blow that's really tough to come back from. That's deflating to lose some of your top players. Purdue hasn't dealt with that too much yet. Spencer Holstedge is a guy you probably wish you still had. You probably wish you still had Eric Miller, but I don't know that was as much of an NIL thing as it just was. Jeff Brom's the one who recruited him to Purdue, and he wanted to go follow Jeff Brom and is friends with Jack Plummer. That all makes sense. But Purdue football has not really, and I guess those defensive linemen, Branson Dean, Jack Sullivan, Lawrence Johnson, but as a whole, Purdue hasn't been just poached through the portal yet. But that's something Purdue needs NIL strength to avoid. Is it too late for this cycle? I don't know. Look, it's November 12th right now. So he said that on November 8th or 9th. The portal opens in a month. I don't know. If you're dead last, I don't know how quickly you can bridge that gap. But I thought it was very interesting that he brought that up. Ryan Walters is very, very aware of where the landscape of college athletics is. He is keenly aware of that. And this was something that I think he was very prepared to talk about and is going to be a major emphasis for him moving forward, as it should be. Because for Purdue to compete and for Purdue to be a bowl team in an expanded Big Ten, it needs to have a competitive NIL structure. Not with Ohio State, not with Michigan, not with Penn State, but with Wisconsin, with Iowa, with Michigan State to a degree. Those are the schools you have to go compete with. Indiana, Illinois, all of them, Minnesota. Very few schools are, 100% satisfied with where they are from an NIL standpoint, because you can never be strong enough, I guess, until the Supreme Court blows all of this up and just says these players are employees and they get a cut of the revenue. But until then, this is the game you got to play, and Ryan Walters is trying to get Purdue to play it at a much higher level. All right, let's close with some hoops here. Purdue wins 87-57 against Morehead State on Friday night. It's always a nice thing when you can walk away from a game thinking, I don't know how well Purdue really played in this game, and then Purdue wins. Purdue covers the 29-point spread. It is what it is. Purdue's done with the 2 bye games to open up the season. It blows out Samford. It blows out Morehead State. Now the real season gets going. Braden Smith was excellent against Morehead State. 11 points, 8 boards, 11 assists, and he probably could have scored more. Telling you, the guy's really good. He is really, really good. It's going to be a big year for him. Lance Jones looked really good again. 15 points from him. He just brings some energy. He seems to bring some professionalism. He talked after the Samford game about some of the killer mentality that Purdue brought to the table in that. That's all really positive. Lance Jones could be a really big piece for Purdue here. I think Purdue got something good here. I don't know that these scoring numbers are going to continue at this high of a level, but I think he's going to be a really valuable piece for Purdue. I got an email and, wanted to talk about this. It's not been a great start for Caleb First. It's difficult when you don't really play with Zach Edey because he's getting a lot of those backup 5 minutes right now with Trey Kaufman-Renn playing more of the 4. But through 2 games, Caleb First is a -3. So Purdue's been outscored when he's on the court. Not a great sign when you've won by 53 and 30. Again, too early to make these sweeping generalizations about Purdue's team because it's not fair. It's not fair to these guys to judge everything based off of 2 games, but you'd like to see him get a little more comfortable out there because it doesn't look tremendously smooth right now. And for a guy in his 3rd year in the program, it probably should. So just something to monitor there. Miles Colvin, Cam Heide, both continue to show some real flashes. Purdue looks to be at a 10-man rotation here. And that's something, to a degree, I think you can get away with early on in the season. You've got your 4 guys in the front court. You've got the 3 starting guards, Smith, Lawyer, and Jones. And then you've got Morton, Heide, and Colvin off the bench. That's something you can work with. I don't know that you can do 10 all season, so we'll see where things go. But that's what I think you're going to see. I think you're going to see Waddell and Berg drop out of the rotation here, and you're going to see Purdue roll with 10 until further notice. We'll see if someone drops out as they get into Xavier and they get into Maui. In Honolulu, I guess I should say. But that's where Purdue's at. Purdue gets into the real schedule now. Xavier on Monday, tomorrow. I'm recording this Sunday morning. I don't know how good Xavier is. Ken Pom has that thing at like Purdue -13. So it's a game Purdue should win. It's in Mackey Arena. That's a big help. I think Xavier's, I don't know their roster super well, but I think they are a little bit new. Zach Fremantle's out. Jack Nunge's not there anymore. So, I think Purdue should be in good shape there. You never know, though. And then it's off to Maui, where Purdue's going to play some incredible competition. And then after that, you've got a couple of Big Ten games. You've got Alabama. You have Arizona, who just took down Duke in Cameron Indoor. Things get real here for Purdue. It's kind of hitting the ground running, all gas, no brakes to a degree. Going to be really interesting to see what happens. I think Purdue's ready for it. Purdue looks ready for it. I thought Purdue looked ready for it when it was like 15-0 on Friday night against Morehead State. You felt like, all right, this team's ready to play someone real. So now it's time. We'll see what Purdue does. It's going to be fascinating, though. There's just not that much to say after 2 bye games because Purdue has dominated this. Zach Edey's not getting the volume of looks so far that he did last year, and I think that's a great thing for Purdue. Don't force feed him in these games where you don't have to. Just let things go. See what you've got elsewhere. He's a great security blanket to have. And the one thing that's very clear, when Purdue needs a bucket this year, I don't think it's going to throw the ball into Edey. I think it's going to bring Edey up to the top of the key for a high ball screen because what Braden Smith is doing in the pick and roll game with Edey is masterful right now. He looks fantastic. That's something that Purdue hasn't had in recent years, is that just straight set a high ball screen and go. That's special. What Braden Smith and Zach Edey can do together, that's really special. So, just another takeaway. But yeah, that's where Purdue sits. So I'll be back here in the midweek. We will talk about whatever happens in Purdue Xavier. We will preview Purdue Northwestern. I could certainly use some questions, so if you have them, you can send them over to me on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. DMs are open. You can just straight tweet them to me as well. You can also email the show, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Looking forward to 2 more football games. We have 29 more basketball games. Lots to talk about. So you'll want to follow on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss a thing. But until later this week, guys, enjoy the basketball game on Monday night and take care.